All right, let's talk about the most famous shipwreck in history. It's a story that even over a century later, we just can't get enough of. Of course, I'm talking about the Titanic and the big mystery of its final resting place. So, let's dive right in.
A question that feels almost strange to ask in our high-tech world, right? I mean, we send rovers to Mars, we explore the deepest trenches of the ocean. So why on earth is this legendary ship still just sitting on the seabed? Well, the answer is way more complicated and honestly way more fascinating than you might think.
So to really get why it's still down there, we have to go back and remember what the Titanic actually was. When it launched back in 1911, it wasn't just another ship. It was this massive symbol of human achievement, a true marvel of engineering that was famously and oh so tragically called the unsinkable ship. And what's just staggering is how fast it all went wrong. The maiden voyage kicks off on April 10th, 1912. For 4 days, it was the picture of luxury and progress. But then, late on April 14th, disaster. Just 2 hours and 40 minutes after hitting that iceberg, the unsinkable ship was completely gone, vanished under the waves. And this really gets to the heart of the tragedy. Out of the 2,200 people on board, a whole mix of the world's richest people and immigrants hoping for a new life, around 1,500 lost their lives. And a big reason for that was a shocking, unforgivable lack of lifeboats. It was just one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. So after the sinking, the big question was, can we get it back? But the problem wasn't a lack of trying or even a lack of money. The first and biggest hurdle was actually way simpler. For decades, absolutely no one had any idea where the Titanic actually was. You have to try and appreciate the sheer scale of this problem. The Titanic went down as somewhere in the North Atlantic, just the second largest ocean on the planet. They didn't have precise coordinates, and as this massive ship sank for miles, powerful ocean currents would have pushed it all over the place. It was like finding a needle in a haystack the size of a continent. Now, even though they couldn't find it, that didn't stop the public's imagination from running wild with some really, creative ideas for recovery. Some people seriously suggested lowering giant electromagnets to just pluck the steel hull off the ocean floor. An even crazier idea was to somehow pump the wreck full of a special fluid that would freeze it into a giant ice block, which would then just float itself to the surface. But these ideas were basically just science fiction at the time. The real world intervened. First, World War I brought everything to a grinding halt. Then, not long after, World War II. These huge global conflicts, plus the massive technological challenges, meant the Titanic was just left alone in its dark, silent resting place for decades.
Okay, let's fast forward. We're getting to the huge turning point in the story. After all those years of silence, the search was back on, and the long-awaited discovery finally happened. But what the explorers found wasn't some glorious treasure ready to be brought home. It was a shocking truth that changed absolutely everything.
The year was 1985. A joint French-American expedition led by the legendary oceanographer Robert Ballard finally found it. 73 years after it sank, the world got its first look at the Titanic again. And they found it at a depth that's just hard to even wrap your head around. 3,800 meters. That's over 12,000 feet down. The pressure there is crushing, the darkness is absolute. It's an incredibly hostile place. And here's the crucial part. Instead of planning how to pull it up, the explorers left a plaque with this message. This wasn't a treasure to be salvaged, it was a gravesite. Those first images showed that the magnificent ship people had been searching for, it didn't really exist anymore, not in the way anyone imagined. So this brings us right back to our main question. We finally found it, so why just leave it there? Well, the discovery didn't just solve the mystery of where the Titanic was. It solved the mystery of why it could never, ever be raised. So here's the harsh reality of it. The ship didn't sink peacefully. The incredible stress of the sinking literally ripped it in two, and those two main pieces are now lying about 600 meters apart. After decades in corrosive saltwater, the steel hull is incredibly weak and fragile. And get this, there's a unique species of bacteria, perfectly named Holomonas titanica, that is literally eating the ship. Any attempt to lift it would just cause the whole thing to disintegrate into a cloud of rust. And on top of all that, it's now a protected UNESCO Cultural Heritage Site, a recognized underwater memorial.
and the clock is ticking. Scientists figure that because of those bacteria and the harsh environment, the wreck could completely fall apart within the next 40 years or so. We're in a race against time, not to raise it, but to simply study and document it before it's gone forever. So, if we can't bring the ship up, is that the end of the story? Not even close. In the huge debris fields scattered all around the wreck, a different kind of legacy was discovered, a story told through thousands of smaller objects. These are like voices from the deep. You've got delicate things perfectly preserved in the cold, dark, low-oxygen water. Deck chairs, menus from the grand dining rooms, even personal belongings. These items have been carefully brought up and conserved, and now they're in museums all over the world, giving us a real, tangible connection to the people on that fateful trip. But out of all the thousands of artifacts, there's maybe no single object that tells a more powerful and personal story than this one. A simple pocket watch, recovered from the belongings of one of the victims.
This is the time on the watch, 2:28 a.m. Now, the Titanic slipped under the waves for good at 2:20 a.m. This watch probably stopped just 8 minutes later, at the exact moment its owner went into that freezing Atlantic water. The ship itself might be crumbling away, but this little object is a haunting, permanent record of the very moment the human tragedy climaxed. It's a story frozen forever, and it proves that the true legacy of the ship itself, but the human lives it carried.